Hey everyone. So, our first case in the judiciary pertaining to civil rights actually is a California case. This is a case that starts in Santa Ana, California, not too far away. The Mendez family, a family of Mexican Americans, wanted to send their kids to a white school. Now, this white school, of course, had better facilities, had better textbooks, and better teachers. But there were separate white and Mexican schools in California. Now, here's what's interesting. The Mendez family won this case, but they didn't win it because it violated the 14th Amendment. They won it because California law did not specify Mexican segregation. So, therefore, there was no legal basis to keep them out of the school. Now, the governor of California then did pass a law that outlawed all types of segregation. That governor's name was, of course, your favorite governor of California, Earl Warren. Rapper noises. Beep. Now, what would Earl Warren do? He would go on to become the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, where he oversaw one of the seminal cases of the civil rights cause, Brown versus Board of Education. Now, Thurgood Marshall also looked at the Mendez case when he was looking for examples of how to go about arguing for an end to segregation. Now, Plessy versus Ferguson. This is a prior case. This is way before the Mendez case. And this is a 1895 case, one of the first civil rights cases. There was a Louisiana law that required black people and white people to ride in separate train cars. Now, Plessy, this is our guy suing somebody. He was 7th, 8th whites and sat in the white car and refused to move. The question went to the court. Was this law unconstitutional under the 14th Amendment? The court said no. Discrimination itself was not unconstitutional. So, this is where we have the doctrine of separate but equal. Discrimination is not unconstitutional. The idea is that supposedly black people are not harmed by discrimination, therefore segregation is a-okay in the eyes of the law for a point. But in 1944, political parties are defined as not entirely private organizations, and the Supreme Court rules that black voters have a role in political parties' primary processes. Brown versus the Board of Education. This is 1954. The school segregation. The Supreme Court did have a history of this point of upholding Plessy versus Ferguson. That is, the court had repeatedly said segregation is okay because things are separate but equal. But education is the weak spot of this argument. If it could be proven that white schools had better textbooks, had better facilities, were safer, had better classroom equipment, then you could not make the argument that things were equal. They were just separate. So the NAACP starts to challenge this case. They wanted to challenge this practice because they recognized education is the weakest part of separate but equal. This is the context. Take a look at this. So in California, again, there was no legislation about segregation. But there was some cases where discrimination in schools was forbidden. And there were some cases where it was required. Look at that map. Look at that map and how racial discrimination was required in schools. And let's not just accuse this of being a problem in the American South, though very clearly it is. But take a look here. This is Virginia. This is Maryland. This is Delaware, where it was required. So what is going on here? Thurgood Marshall and the NAACP decided to formalize the challenge to separate but equal by focusing on education. Now, in 1952, the NAACP told African American parents to ignore segregation and try to enroll their children in white schools, the closest school to their house, regardless of if it was white or not. The Supreme Court decides to combine all the cases of these black families suing states into one case, Brown versus the Board of Education. Here is the fundamental question. Does the segregation of children in public schools solely on the basis of race deprive minority children of equal protection under the laws guaranteed by the 14th Amendment? This had been the argument upholding segregation for decades. That yes, segregation was separate, but it was equal. There was equal protection under the law. But, very clearly, this is not the case. And it was certainly not the case in schools. The reality that separate but equal was anything but equal couldn't be ignored anymore. 9 members of the Supreme Court voted for Brown and 0 voted against. The ruling is that segregation has a detrimental effect on children, leading to perceptions of inferiority, therefore is in conflict with the 14th Amendment. Now, this is a watershed moment, and we will continue on with civil rights as social movements in the second video.